Ahoy! New World is in a very awkward place at the moment, and so am I for that matter. Some of you may remember that earlier this year I made some predictions and I was banking on New World performing well, especially because of the Season 4 roadmap. I was thinking that they would be able to carry all of that momentum from Season 3 into Season 4 and then keep players interested longer. That was absolutely not the case, and I want to dig into that a little bit and also talk a bit about the future of this channel. But first I would like to thank my Patreon supporters. You guys are the reason why I don't have a full-blown panic attack at this point, because it means I don't purely rely on the whims of YouTube and New World. So just how grim is it looking? Here we have the Steam charts. We're going to begin with the last 3 months here. You can see this is the spike around expansion time. We're getting up to 77,000 players and we have a very steady decline. Down to 26,000 here. Though, if we look at this at a closer lens, you can see that this is really just the different times of the day. And if we, for example, say we want to see a month, then you have a lot more ups and downs within a day. And you can see that at the beginning of the month, we're starting around somewhere like 41,000. We even go higher than that on the weekends. Mondays is Sundays for the rest of the world, so we get 45,000. Whereas now we're reaching roughly half that. So losing half the player base in a month alone, almost. Obviously, this is not entirely representative. You have to keep in mind things like average players are not the same as peak players and so on. But overall, we can see a very clear trend here. In October, we had 37,000 players, and now we are down to 24,000, and it's still declining slightly further. So a 34% loss here within a single month. Still pretty rough for the overall development. And if we look at a little bit more than a year, we look at Brimstone in comparison, we can see that the initial spike here was higher because I think more people still had hope for the game. Obviously, it was also free, whereas this time it was a paid expansion. But the initial spike here was 77,000. That was still okay. Not as much as here, but you can see that we had a much higher number to work with initially. And then the downward crash, I would say, was relatively fast. I think it might actually be faster than it is now. But it also doesn't matter because the initial number was just roughly twice as high, so obviously not going to crash as fast. So if we look at the numbers down here, the average player count, again, I think this is a little bit more important, but we can keep the graph to have the visibility of that as well. Then we can see that here we have this drop off to 24,000 basically at the start of December, whereas here we were at 67,000 in November. And sure, we dropped down to minus 38%, but that's kind of comparable, like in terms of overall percentages. So the 41,000 here still held up better overall in player count, and that is something we see then carrying on. It was only in February that we really dropped below 20,000, which I think is probably going to happen in December already, because the December patch was just not at all what we were expecting, what we were promised, I would say, for the most part. Sure, there were a few people that said from the start they're not going to be able to make this, but I did think that they would at least be able to bring out some of the major content features that are coming, whereas now basically we get a new expedition and we get the new storyline. That's the main things, and then we get some new artifacts around and all that other stuff. That's going to fill some time, I'm sure, but I don't think it's going to be anything that brings a lot of people back. I found that, for example, with the new expeditions, I'm kind of not having the same motivation to do that, just because you have the situation where you can only play it for a week and then you have to wait forever to play it again, which is going to get a little bit better because we're going to have 3 expeditions at the same time. But still, I feel like the hype for a new expedition when you can't just play it whenever you log in is something that takes away from it very quickly. And like I said in a previous video, to me it felt like they were still waiting for something else that they wanted to announce for Season 4 or similar, because they scrapped so much. It felt like there would be something in return, but with how they have been talking in the last dev shows, Fortune Eternal and so on, it didn't really sound like that. They're kind of getting ready for their winter break from what I can tell. At that point, there would be the in-between update for the group finder eventually, but the general next big update would likely be around February or maybe even March, depending on how they schedule next year with the season system. It seems like they're trying to pull things forward a little bit, which is why the last season was only 2 months. That's my impression anyways, but we'd probably see the roadmap in between, but generally end up with a very similar situation to last year, which I said was a major problem. Winter is when everyone is at home playing games, and therefore new content there is especially important if you're just coming off an expansion. If you're still interested in New World and you made it this far, then consider subscribing to support the New World side of this channel. But there is a reality check here, and that is a very sad one. I don't know if New World will remain sustainable for me. I would love for that to be the case, but I'm just not sure if it's possible. I've had some very significant changes in my life recently, hence also the long break, and I may need to move to a different place in the near future, which would possibly mean paying significantly more rent, at which point I just don't know if that's something I can do at all with New World. I'm 100% gonna try, but I'm not oblivious to everyone taking a break. Even I have minimized my game time until the next season because I don't want to burn myself out. There is still plenty to talk about for me, but I understand that maybe there aren't that many people interested in listening right now, so we'll just have to see how things go from here. And on the topic of where things are going, I kind of want to touch upon the content path that New World is currently choosing. Scott recently said that the main reason they're delaying the content is because they want to rather keep it slower but make the content better and less buggy and so on, so they kind of want to not rush things. Now the thing is, this has been their content philosophy for the entire year. This is not actually something they came up with recently. This is something they basically announced after the issues that came until the Void Gauntlet patch, pretty much, where they were just constantly rushing. So there isn't really a change of pace by doing that, and still they delayed content a lot more than on that roadmap. And I also kind of wonder about the kind of content they're choosing, because we are seeing, for example, relatively frequent additions of new expeditions, which I think are relatively temporary content. Again, they're not even always available in the first place, and sure, there is some reason to do expeditions for the new rewards, but I do feel that they're also not super long-term for most players. There's only so many times you can repeat an expedition before it just isn't that interesting anymore, and certain expeditions are just favored over others as well. Like, leaderboards for easy expeditions, such as Lazarus, are usually a lot more crowded than the ones for more difficult expeditions that take longer and kind of end up at least similar in rewards in terms of dark matter, and also the loot from the longer expeditions isn't necessarily better. Sure, you get more chests at the end, but for example, Lazarus has very strong gear in terms of perks, so kind of a weird choice, I think, to put certain gear in relatively easy to farm expeditions, and another reason why people have less incentive to do the harder ones. This is fortunately a little bit different with the next expedition, but still, I feel like there needs to be more different variation in terms of content that comes with those seasonal patches, so people have something else to do that lasts a while longer too. Of course, one of the options that is always talked about is PvP content, but that's by far not the only possible option. For example, imagine if they made mount races more than they currently are, made them actual races between players that you get certain rewards for, you can get on leaderboards for, and so on. Suddenly they could use various racing routes that already exist as all kinds of different content, and then you could make that a scheduled thing that at certain times certain races are going on and so on. And you'd have a lot to do for players that's of a somewhat different kind from the stuff that they're currently doing, without having to add all too much work in order to put the systems in place, because leaderboards already exist, scheduled events already exist, like a lot of that is already in the game. I'm hoping that they'll generally find some more creative solutions for introducing more new content at a relatively decent pace in the future, but we'll see. For now, a massive thank you to every one of you who has supported me in any of the various ways so far. You guys are the best. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope that this channel can live on somehow, and this is not going to be a video looking back at the past, being like, oh, well, that was the thing I did. If you're new by any chance, or you just haven't done it yet, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And of course, a very special thank you once again to my Patreons. By the way, also let me know if you want to see any content not related to New World from me. I'm open for suggestions. Thanks for watching. Duke Sloth, out.